Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the incredibly wild, dramatic story of Preston Tucker and his highly ambitious quest to build the very first completely new American car in 50 years. It's a tale packed with groundbreaking innovation, massive public hype, mechanical nightmares, and a spectacular downfall that people are literally still debating today.
To really understand why this story matters, we have to look at the world right after World War II. During the war, American factories shifted entirely to producing war material. Because of this, Detroit automakers hadn't produced a genuinely new car model since 1941. So by the time the war ended, you had this massive, car-hungry American public desperate for something fresh. But the big three? Well, they were just rolling out slightly updated pre-war designs. This created an unprecedented, wide-open window of opportunity for an independent visionary to swoop in and completely capture the public's imagination.
Enter Preston Thomas Tucker. He was this tall, impeccably dressed, and intensely enthusiastic former car salesman who had worked his way through Cadillac, Ford, Studebaker, and Pierce Arrow. He even had a background building race cars for the Indianapolis 500. With his bold slogan, "The car you have been waiting for," Tucker promised a vehicle that would absolutely shatter the status quo. He wasn't just offering a new look, He was promising revolutionary design and engineering that the legacy automakers simply weren't providing.
Section 1. Designing the Tucker 48. To build this revolutionary machine, Tucker secured a massive former bomber plant in Cicero, Illinois, and brought in visionary designers to shape the future.
Now, Tucker's vision was literally decades ahead of its time, especially when we talk about automotive safety. He included a centrally located third headlight, people called it the Cyclops Eye, that actually pivoted when you turned the steering wheel to illuminate corners. He added a shatterproof windshield designed to pop outward in a collision rather than inward. He included a padded dashboard, which was just unheard of back then. He even moved the glove box to the doors to create a clear crash chamber in front of the passenger seat, and he wrapped the whole vehicle in a perimeter frame to protect everyone inside. Honestly, these are safety features that wouldn't become industry standards for decades.
But actually making that vision a reality, that proved incredibly difficult, especially under the hood. Tucker initially designed a massive, highly complex 589 cubic inch flat six engine. It featured a direct drive system and valves operated by oil pressure. Sounds great on paper, right? Well, it was a mechanical headache. It only produced about 88 horsepower instead of the promised 150, and it struggled to even idle properly. With time running out, the engineering team made a drastic pivot. They went out and purchased a 334 cubic inch air-cooled Franklin engine, which was originally intended for Bell helicopters, if you can believe that, and they heavily modified it for water cooling. It was a crazy, bold move, but it actually worked, producing a reliable 166 horsepower. But, of course, fixing one problem creates another. This engine pivot meant their original direct drive system was completely out. They needed a transmission fast. Their first temporary fix was literally sending employees out to local junkyards to buy up old, used transmissions from pre-war Cord automobiles. They refurbished these just to get the prototypes moving. Later on, engineers heavily modified those into what they called the Ypsilanti Y1, with stronger gears. But Tucker's ultimate goal was always an in-house design, so they brought in Warren Rice, the creator of the Buick Dynaflow, who designed the Tuckermatic. It was a continuously variable transmission with only 27 moving parts. Absolutely brilliant, but sadly, it arrived very late in the production cycle.
Section 2. The Tin Goose Premiere. June 19, 1947.
Picture this. Over 3,000 eager people, including the press and future dealers, are gathered at the Chicago plant. The hype is absolutely electric. But behind the curtain, total chaos. It was a mechanical nightmare. The prototype, affectionately dubbed the Tin Goose, was significantly heavier than planned. Just before the reveal, they installed these heavy truck batteries to help crank the original 589 engine, and the extra weight literally snapped the independent suspension arms. Mechanics are making frantic, last-minute repairs while the crowd just waited out there. When they finally got it running, that experimental engine was so deafeningly loud that Tucker actually ordered the live band to play as loudly as possible just to drown out the noise. And to top it all off, the starter required outside power to turn over, so they just had to leave the engine running the entire time, while liquid coolant boiled over and steam escaped everywhere. Now, although the Tin Goose did eventually roll down the ramp to massive cheers from the crowd, the mechanical realities quickly leaked out. Because the prototype was essentially slapped together in a rush, it initially lacked a reverse gear. Drew Pearson, who was one of the top newspaper columnists at the time, reported publicly that the car was a complete fraud because it couldn't drive backward. He also claimed the chassis made strange noises going down the road.
And even though the reverse gear issue was just a prototype quirk that was later completely fixed, the damage to the company's reputation was immediate and severe. A devastating storm of negative media attention followed.
Section 3. SEC Trial and Downfall. Desperate for mass production funding to keep the dream alive, Tucker initiated a rather controversial accessories program where buyers purchased things like luggage and radios just to secure a spot on the waiting list.
This accessory pre-purchase plan did manage to raise $1 million, but it also triggered massive regulatory alarms. In May 1948, the Securities and Exchange Commission, alongside the Justice Department, launched a full-scale investigation, suspecting mail fraud and conspiracy. This forced Tucker to immediately halt production and lay off 1,600 workers. By January 1949, the massive Cicero plant officially closed its doors for good. In June, Tucker and his associates were indicted on 31 counts. The trial dragged all the way into January 1950, where, in a stunning conclusion, the jury completely acquitted all the defendants of every single charge. Throughout this entire ordeal, Preston Tucker firmly believed he was the victim of a coordinated conspiracy. He suspected that the established Detroit Big Three automakers, feeling deeply threatened by his disruptive technology and the massive public interest in his car, used their political influence to completely crush him. Specifically, he pointed to Michigan Senator Homer Ferguson as a key figure orchestrating the bureaucratic roadblocks and the aggressive SEC investigation that ultimately choked his company's funding.
At the trial itself, the prosecution relied heavily on the flaws of that original Tin Goose prototype, completely ignoring the fact that Tucker had actually built vastly improved production models since then. The defense team was so confident in their case that they didn't even bother calling any witnesses. They simply stated the government had failed to prove any offense, so there was nothing to defend. And, well, the jury agreed. But while Tucker was legally vindicated, the victory was entirely hollow. The relentless negative publicity, the halted production, and the massive financial strain had already driven the Tucker Corporation into receivership. The dream was officially dead.
Section 4. The multi-million-dollar legacy. Ironically, while the company died in court, the cars themselves proved the government completely wrong during rigorous endurance tests at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, where they drove beautifully and consistently hit 90 miles per hour.
Out of Tucker's grand, highly ambitious vision for mass production, only 51 original cars were ever completed. That tiny number includes the Tin Goose prototype and 50 production sedans assembled before the factory doors closed forever, with just a few of those being completed by a skeleton crew of extremely dedicated employees right after the shutdown.
Because of their incredible rarity, their unique history, and that genuinely innovative engineering we talked about, those surviving vehicles are now recognized as absolute masterpieces of industrial design. Whenever they rarely appear at auction, they command staggering prices. In fact, to put that into perspective, Tucker chassis number 1043 sold at a 2012 auction for nearly $3 million. The famous director Francis Ford Coppola even owns one, and he actually made a hit movie about Preston Tucker's life.
So it leaves us with this profound and honestly fascinating historical irony to consider. The Tucker 48 was branded a pipe dream, right? A fraud, an impossible machine by critics and regulators. Yet the handful of cars that somehow escaped that factory proved their brilliant capability and are today revered as priceless artifacts of American ingenuity. It really makes you wonder, if this incredible machine was crushed before it could ever truly reach the road, what other world-changing innovations have we lost, simply because they threaten the established way of doing things? Thank you for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you next time.